All right, I want to talk about another manifestation or form of the Queen of Heaven. And this comes from ancient Egypt. Actually, there were ancient principalities that were worshipped in all Egyptian culture. And they were Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Ra. And I'm not going to do a whole entire teaching on those, but suffice it to say, and it's mapped out in the book, and I've taught on this. I think we even have another teaching on our website exposing the foundations of Freemasonry. You can even go there and get that one, which will give you an in depth teaching about the foundations of Freemasonry. But these gods became the ones that were literally, like what I just said, the foundation of Freemasonry. Isis being the moon goddess, the queen of heaven from ancient Egypt. Well, how is she active today? So we always talk a lot about when we talk about Freemasonry, we give that whole history of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Ra. But there is also a female order to Freemasonry that is called the Order of the Eastern Star. And it was established in 1850 by a Freemason, and his name was Robert Morse. And it operates with a ritual structure that is closely affiliated to that of Freemasonry, the Men's Lodge, and it utilizes 5 degrees. Now, I'm not going to go into all 5 of those degrees. I just want to talk about that in its symbolism. It's an inverted pentagram, which to some is literally associated with, and it really is, not to some, it really is associated with Satan, dark magic, and rebellion against any type of religious norms, that inverted pentagram. And so in Freemasonry, they believed that Osiris, the sun god, and Isis, the moon goddess, came together in sexual relation. They were husband and wife in the demonic myth. And it is represented that when that happens, that there is a regeneration that happens to the individual, man or woman, who is showing allegiance to that, or even to regions when this happens at a larger level. So, what do we have going on with Eastern Star? It is still very prevalent in our nation today. And interestingly enough, they even have some ceremonies and rituals that even refer to Lilith, which is another form of the Queen of Heaven manifestation that you've heard me talk about. And so there's daughters of Isis. This is another form. There's so many that I could list that are very active to this day, and they come together. Female women come together in this Masonic structure in Eastern Star, in Daughters of Isis, in many different forms to give their reverence in their rituals to the moon goddess Isis. They still meet today. They're very active today. But I also want to talk about how has Isis, this moon goddess from ancient Egypt, made its way into what we would say New Age, Wicca, modern occult activities. So I want to talk to you about a woman briefly by the name of Madame Blavatsky. And she actually formed what is called the Theosophical Society. I'm going to try to say that again. It's not the easiest to say. Theosophical Society in 1875. And she established it in New York City. And it is considered a key movement in the development of all modern occultism that we still see today in our nation and the nations of the world. Interestingly enough, when she was born in Russia, and her grandfather was a devout Mason. And so she grew up reading books about the Masonic. And in 1851, she began to have these supernatural encounters, even with what they call like this spiritual adept, even from India. So here you have her, a young girl. She was having encounters. They said she would see in the demonic realm. She would mention things about seeing the dead. She would read books about Osiris and Isis. Now she's having an encounter with this spiritually adept from India that taught her all about the entities that were worshipped in India, especially Shiva and Kali. Kali's another form of the Queen of Heaven. But then she went to Egypt in 1871 through 1873, where she engaged in a lot of mystical activities, occultism, and spiritualism. And she really became acquainted with who this principality, Isis, was. So, when she is in New York, let's jump because she was in Egypt 1871, 1873. She comes to New York and in 1875 launches this theosophical society, and she began to write books. She wrote The Secret Doctrine, and she wrote Isis Unveiled. Listen to her own words when to her sister when she was writing Isis Unveiled. Well, Vera, whether you believe me or not, something extraordinary is happening to me. You cannot imagine in what a charmed world of pictures and visions I live. I'm writing Isis, not writing, but rather copying out and drawing that which she personally shows to me. Upon my words, sometimes it seems to me that the ancient goddess of beauty in person leads me through all the countries of past centuries which I have to describe. Wow, guys, right? So she has that time in Egypt. She's in New York in 1875, establishes the Theosophical Society with top Masons. And this is the foundation, her writings of all modern occultism that we see not only in our nation and the nations of the world. So, what do I mean by modern occultism? You've got New Age beliefs. You've got those who practice Wicca. You've got those who practice dark magic, who practice what they say is white magic. I'm just going to say right here, right now, there is no good such thing as good magic. All magic is dark and demonic. But this was the foundation. They said when she was writing, they said it was like as if something, people watching her, would watch Isis. They would watch something come over her and they would look at her, and it wasn't Madame Blavatsky looking at them anymore. It was these principalities. It was Isis. It was Kali. It was those that she had learned to conjure up. And so, guys, even in the feminist movement, at the foundation of the suffrage movement, there were many that were inspired by Madame Blavatsky and her writings, and they themselves began to write books in the in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that would say that Isis was the mother of all. And many of them were involved in the feminist movement. They were involved in the suffrage movement. Some of them were involved in education and started writing books to influence, even back then, the educational system in the early 1900s. I'll just read to you two or three real quickly. And you're saying, well, this is early 1900s. We're in 2024. Guys, this is still evolving through Eastern Star. This is still evolving through Daughters of Isis. This is still being practiced in modern day occultism and those that are part of the Theosophical Society, which is very alive and active today, and whose authors are writing books to this day of occultism in America, occultism in the world, and how these encounters are influencing it today. But let me just give you an example. Dion Fortune, she was noted as a strong voice who pioneered the contemporary image of Isis as the woman in her book, All Women Are Isis. There are also two other women who were influential members of the Theosophical Society in this occult driven feminism movement. One of them was Frances Swiney, a writer and women's suffrage activist and spokesperson, and Florence Farr, a British actress and writer. Both were also members of the Fabian Society and the Eugenics Educational Society, the Eugenics Educational Society is they wanted a pure, clean race. This was a racist movement meant to get rid of African Americans, meant to get rid of Jews, and it was behind all racism. And the Fabian Society is a British socialist organization founded in 1884 with the vision of advancing socialist principles through gradual means of reform. Both women had significant voices within feminism, locally and internationally, advancing their beliefs of ISIS. And for the sake of space, I even say this in the book, I will not belabor their entire stories, but they wrote books for the education system. They wrote books behind the feminist movement. They stood for eugenics and behind the abortion industry. And so those who are in Wicca, those who are in New Age, those who are practicing in the Theosophical Society, which is very alive and well, especially in the United States, in America, and abroad, are very inspired by Blavatsky's writings, and in ceremonies and in their rituals, they will actually do prayers or do their conjuring up of ISIS to empower what they are doing. And so these are still manifesting not only even in Freemasonry through Eastern Star and Daughters of Isis, but we're seeing it even manifest. And we do not want to see ISIS take hold of our next generation through Wicca, through witchcraft, through New Age, and occult practices. So get the book. There's a prayer that can be prayed at the end, and it will give you great, amazing strategies on how to see if this is active in your region so you can pray for transformation. God bless you guys.